Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome to Active Creative Perspectives. I'm Valerie, your guide on this transformative journey where a unique prism of life unfolds in full spectrum. And today we have beautiful Annie joining us from Melbourne. Or where is it currently you're based?
Yeah, so I've just moved to Castlemaine on Jarrah Wurrung country. It's very beautiful here, but very new move from Melbourne.
Yes, and today I would like to ask, questions about your life and how, what brought you to what you're doing, moving countries and, professions, and understanding where you are currently, and how do you see, your life transition into this space. So just if you can, just think of how you ended up where you are today.
Well, if I go right back to the start, when I was a kid, I really struggled at school when I was quite young, later on discovering that dyslexic. And I failed all my first kind of standardized testing and felt quite lost being neurodivergent and seeing the world, but didn't have the words then. But art was the one place where I felt calm and at peace and understood. And really, art gave me a sense of identity. And as I kind of grew up, I was just always fascinated by people and loved to travel. So I lived in Sri Lanka for a year when I left school, and worked in kind of a remote area in a vocational centre with women with disabilities. So I kind of always loved working and doing the kind of caring aspect. And, we're therapists for a reason, kind of come from a background of family with mental health issues and myself. And I went to quite a traditional fine arts school, Aberystwyth in Wales. And now I look back at my dissertation and it was all art therapy reading, because I was really looking at art and psychology. So I suppose being a typical Gemini, I always have like these two sides, and art psychotherapy perfectly encompassed both of those, using the person and the spiritual with the science as well. So when I discovered art therapy and was looking at the reading just naturally in my last years of studying fine art, that's when I kind of then was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Was it popular, like how you discovered it during your studying? Was it something familiar to you, or was it something very unique that you haven't heard of?
It was actually kind of a gradual process, interestingly. I kind of, was reading these things and kind of seeing that you could use art to help people, and then understood that and wanted to then do my master's in it and be a qualified art therapist. I went to a couple of open day talks, and in those open day talks was like, yes, this is it. This is for me. And then did more clinical work and clinical experience to get into the master's in art psychotherapy in London at Roehampton University.
And how is Australian art therapy space is different to UK?
I think there's a few differences, obviously, where we're at. So, in the UK, art therapists, we're kind of generally known as art psychotherapists, and the masters are more in art psychotherapy, and you're more sitting with the psychologists. So if you're working in a hospital or an institution setting, you're sitting with other psychologists, and normally looking at those assessments and intakes. As here, you're very much normally sitting more with maybe occupational therapists. So I think that's one of the biggest difference. And I really struggled with that when I first came here, using psychoanalytic and psychodynamic language. That was kind of in my master's and in my training. And being more as an activity here and kind of something to do. Yeah. But also with that was kind of exciting, because I was like, we're at the the forefront of like changing and implementing these systems, which was exciting. After 10 years, I am getting quite tired now, but at the beginning, there was a lot of energy for that. The other thing that I really found with Australia that really deepened myself as a person and my practice was when I came here, there was a bit of an armor, I suppose, around no, art therapy is a science, it's academic, it's, and there was it's not woo-woo and it's not, this airy-fairy thing. But actually working in Australia, it is such a spiritual place and it is so deep in soul and spirit for, obvious reasons. And working in institutional settings, when someone is so close to death in a high secure setting, or when they've stared death in the eye, they go to that place of spirit and they go to that place of the soul and looking, whatever spirit may mean to you, whether it's the heart, whether it's your soul. And I couldn't ignore that. So I suppose I really started to bring more of the spiritual practice into my own practice, which just opened up so many doors. It was like this block within myself. And I'm a very spiritual person and always was as a child. So that's just been beautiful to open that and bring nature and more ecotherapy into the settings. So yeah, that's been beautiful.
So by coming from the traditional psychoanalysis dynamics into Australia, which I've heard a lot as well, that it's more process-driven art therapy here that drives the practices, and finding that there's a lot of spiritual impact, connection to the earth and nature in Australia that is impacting the therapeutical world and becomes part of it. Yeah. So I'm I'm a transpersonal art therapist, which implies, that a lot of ritualistic approaches into art therapy and using spirituality, not in a woo-woo sense, but in the sense of belief system, which I find resonates in the most, as you said, vulnerable times, because there's no answers, for what's coming. And everyone that follows the signs when they reach that point, like of death or fear of death, gets to that point that there's something beyond it and there's a collective part. So in your practice, how does that change your perspective on life? Because you had to restructure yourself as well, like to understand how people go through this and your belief system and understanding of life, and your value system in that sense, coming and facing that there's more spiritual approach to that. Did it change your personally?
Yeah, definitely. I think I use it more. I listen to it, I listen to what my spirituality is trying to tell me, and feel that and connect with that. In kind of a more clinical setting, we often kind of go back to the wellness wheel, or a well-being wheel, and that's made up of mind, body, and spirit. And again, I kind of explain spirit can mean so many different things, but actually patients, clients, when I talk about this, they go, I'm so glad you're speaking about this, because in these settings, when people are experiencing hallucinations or schizophrenia, often talks of religion or God or whatever it may be do come into those. And so they're very frightened to then express those things. And as soon as you put a block up, or you're not expressing those things, that's when things become dangerous. It's like holding a ball underwater, and it's eventually going to go poof. So if we can safely just start exploring those things and talking about those things in a space where people feel that they can and they're not going to be judged, I think that's really important. And I think that just mirrors in my own life. As soon as I could start kind of accepting these parts of myself, or I mean, for me, my spirituality is very much in the garden and in nature. When I could start really kind of listening to the soil and the wind and kind of communicating and expressing that, that's when I become safer as a person, because I'm attuned to that part of myself. So yeah, I think we also have to look at, the body and being, being healthy and getting enough sleep and things like that, and eating well. And we also have to look at the mind. But it's a balance. So yeah.
And that going through that transformation yourself, understanding that to tap into the spirituality, it is natural, and a lot of people feel better as soon as you said it comes out. Where do you think that such a big framework that was set up, that people finding it hard to start believing the mystic or magical part of like spirituality, that they're trying to avoid, especially in clinical practices? Do you have, like, what's your perspective on how did that framework appear?
I think it's probably multiple things. I mean, in my own experience, it was this kind of, I think as well with my learning difficulties and dyslexia, it's kind of me trying to be academic and trying to be this person and know, I can, live up to this standard. But that standard's a very medical, white, male model. And it's not serving purpose. And it's not working. You only have to look at the rate of, illnesses and mental health decline in the kind of modern world, in a Western kind of framework.
Yep.
And I think one of the biggest evidences is, of course, like it's coming more and more. We're talking about this as cultural ethnology and anthropology, where we've been using art and movement to heal literally since the beginning of time. So there's got to be something in it, So, going back to that and allowing that. But there's a lot of, in schools, Ken Robinson talks about this quite a lot. When we're babies and toddlers, we use our whole body to express and our whole body to show how we're feeling. And it kind of goes down to the top half, maybe writing, and then it goes this, and now it's literally our thumb.
Yeah.
It's kind of doing a lot of the expressing, which is just so not human. So I think, if we, all the time in the art setting, in the art therapy room, I hear, I'm no good at art, I can't do this. And it's of course, that your lifetime of having fear that we're going to judge you based on that is stopping you from showing your creativity. So it's a really hard thing to overcome, but something magical happens when you start breaking down that barriers. And also on top of that, like there are a lot of practices, out there, and we're really talking about this in Australia at the moment, people calling themselves art therapists that aren't registered. And there are a lot of practices where people do have healing that is unsafe. And if people have trauma, people can be so vulnerable. And I've seen that as well. People like going into unsafe practices and it just opening up so much, too fast. So we do have to be careful, and we do have to have frameworks. I talk a lot in my work and as a supervisor about the outer framework and the inner framework. And they're both really important. I think of it as a picture frame, being an art therapist. And that outer framework holding policies, frameworks, procedures. If something happens, then we can fall back on that as the therapist as well for ourselves. And then that inner framework where we can really lean in and, have the attunement and have the therapeutic relationship and have that alchemy working. And I think of it as a bit of a circle and, continuing leaning out and leaning in, being able to hold the space, the time, the safety, making sure we have that person, and then being able to lean in to the relationship and to what's happening. And it's a constant dance and something I think good therapists are very good at, kind of holding both those spaces.
And there's so many that you touched on that I would love to expand on, but the most important part that I find, which we still have that this misunderstanding of art therapy is because we use the word art, right? And as you said, there's a lot of practices that currently become trending and popular where unregistered or not currently under any frameworks using the methods that hasn't been safely put in as as a process, as understanding. And there's a big word like trauma-informed practices, and people go into that practices with very open heart and they want to heal themselves, but there's a danger in getting into that very open space and then finding that there's no one to hold you. And in your practice, because I've touching upon that, I've met people that has been disillusioned because of art therapy, because of that experience, and then they have already an understanding that it is not safe, it is not like a therapy place. In your practice, did you see the clients or patients that were going through therapy or tried like a healing practices that took them in the wrong place?
Yeah, I have. Some people who feel that they can never go back from that. They've gone on a retreat in Bali and it's an unsafe, and they've come back and they've been very traumatized. But I think it kind of also goes for, I think it goes for all therapy. I know loads of people who have gone to like not a great therapist and gone, I'm never going to go back. And I always say, like, making sure they're registered and the credentials and stuff, those things. But also, finding the right therapist is like finding the right hairdresser. That's how I kind of use it. Right. You might have to shop around. You might find the perfect hairdresser straight away. You might have to go to other places. And at different times, you're going to need different hairdressers. I've had several different types of therapy. And I'm sure I'm going to explore new types of therapy as well as I kind of grow. So I think it does go for a lot of different therapies as well. But yeah, it's the art does kind of somehow, it can be confusing because it's like, are you doing artwork or are you doing drawing? And, and what does an art therapist do? And I kind of almost say, because they're trying to pinpoint it, and I say, well, a psychologist works in so many different ways. CBT, DBT, EDMR, tapping, a psychologist. And that's how art therapists work. They can work in the whole spectrum of art therapy. I might work more psychodynamic, or I might work more looking at the spiritual. Some people might be looking more at the community and using more art that's therapeutic rather than doing therapy as art. So, yeah.
And what's your preferred way? What's the way that fills up yourself as well?
I obviously very person-centered. I think for me, the most important thing is authenticity. And recently I've had a few people I've worked with closely who have taken their lives. And what's been almost so reassuring to me when I think about my own work in that space is how I've been able to authentically be in that space with that person. And yes, hold the space clinically, I suppose, but also not be clinical. And I think with not just art therapy, but a lot of creative therapies, music therapy, we can really kind of show a lot of ourselves and our human and our heart without words. So whether it's responding in music or really seeing that person's soul through the picture, which we can't do in life a lot. Like you can't, if you go into the supermarket and someone says, "How are you?" You can't really authentically show how you are, but through using the arts, we can. And I think that's just so special and unique how we can hold both of these things at the same time. One, holding the space and being a support person there and being a mirror for that person, but also we can show so much soul and heart through the unspokenness of what can happen within creative therapies.
And what I'm hearing a lot, that basically what art therapy provides for people is to get into that safe space where they can move and be childlike and express themselves. Because of societal norm, we created the world where this is not possible and it's not appropriately seen. If you start expressing yourself, what you feel, how you feel with art, with music, with singing, and when you have kids, you can see how they freely, they start singing and dancing and moving around, or they can express their emotions with just body without even saying things, or they can go and draw on the walls and paint the walls with expressing how they feel. And because of the norm of the society, we can't do that. So art therapy creates a space where you can express yourself. And that's why a lot of practices they call expressive therapy. So why do you think it's important for people to actually express themselves?
Because we would burst if we didn't. Isn't it one of my favorite quotes, and I'm going to say this wrong, Carl Jung, that was under my studies, was very much a Jungian perspective. He said something like, if I had left those parts hidden, I would have gone mad or something. So to express those parts, I think it's so important to be able to do that. And that doesn't mean, we have to be going around going, this is how I feel. This is what, it's a balance, and it's but I think by doing that, kind of that ball analogy, or, like a fizzy drink in a bottle, if we shake it up and we just take the top off, it's just going to go, but if we just slowly let it out in an authentic way. And I mean, I think, connection and validation is what humans seek at the end of the day. And I think that's what art therapy allows. Like when we go really back to basics. I think a lot in my work, I, really, again, like I think Jung said this, an image is the like kind of quickest way to the unconscious or the subconscious. And obviously in kind of psychoanalytic dynamic terms, we think about that quite a lot. And I think it's really important to be using those parts and thinking about those parts. I often kind of compare it to if, you're having the same dream every night, and, it's, you can't get your clothes on for work or whatever it might be. It's an anxiety dream and you're having it and you'll kind of find that it repeats itself. But if you write it down, then it might it might start lessening. And then if you actually stop and actually like really look at it and think, I'm having this anxiety dream every night where I'm feeling rushed in the morning. Maybe I need to action that and slow down. Our bodies communicate to us all the time of what we need and how we need it. And unfortunately, we normally leave it till it gets to the physical. So to when our body and the kind of mental state is saying, okay, you're not listening through this, what I'm trying to express, or you're not allowing yourself to express that. So now, it's going to come in the form of, chronic fatigue or being unhappy, or, people can get real physical, sicknesses that kind of come out of the mental health illnesses as a result of, that part not being able to be expressed. So, yeah, it's...
so what I'm hearing is that, the space for subconscious to come out and have that space to understand your subconscious, put it on the paper, project it into your consciousness. And then if we don't do that, that subconscious comes out through psychosomatic expression in the body.
Yeah.
And then we have to deal with that as a form of fixing something that hasn't been done through the course.
Or a real stuckness.
And a lot of people just trying to fix the problem, right? So they're trying to fix the somatic part of it, not understanding the cause and root of it. And that's where if you have a space to express it, through therapy, through music, through dancing, that subconscious mind doesn't keep you trapped and feels like you're hearing yourself. So you don't feel trapped in there.
I was going to say as well, I think it's just really important as well. This is why I love art, because it allows yourself to bring out that subconscious, what you need in your own time, if we work in a more non-directive way. So, sometimes the unconscious, it's unconscious for a reason. And, I've had people who have said, I might have said a question, they go, Annie, if I open that box, there's going to be chairs across the room. Like, it needs to stay. Right. And it's like, okay, that's fine. It's not the push, but sometimes just maybe doing an action or putting red paint on the page is enough. And that's kind of enough to kind of then have that part expressed. So we don't always have to understand it.
And then, to have the analytical set on it, it's just about expressing it and just projecting from, how does it feel in your body. And what are you currently working on that drives you and excites you?
Quite a lot at the moment, where I've just, so I'm on my long service leave. I'm the senior art therapist in the psychiatric unit. And I've done that for about 5 years. And before that was in a high secure setting. So I've really worked in mostly secure settings with acutely unwell people. And I'm having a bit of a break. I had February just to actually just step away from the therapy world, which I really needed to personally. And we've done this move, but now my mind is going and like I've started then thinking, okay. So I'm trying to get that balance that's very typical of me, of trying to have too many balls in the air. And as you know, I have a daughter, a toddler, so trying to have that balance as well. But a few things are, I think, one, I'm really interested in how art therapists do assessments in spaces. And I think we kind of almost sometimes pretend like, no, we don't assess and we don't do that, but we do. We observe and we assess so much in sessions, and we use lots of different tools to do that. And, it might be from informal assessments of like observations, reflective questions, the engagement, problem solving, frustration tolerance, the interactions of space, of art materials, and then kind of more, using more theories such as, like the therapeutic triangle, like Joyce Shavarian, or the ETC, the Expressive Therapies Continuum. So there's I'm really interested in kind of looking at that. And, with the NDIS and everything at the moment, like one of the big kind of arguments is that you can't make formal assessments. And we do all the time. I do a lot with neurodivergent clients, and often sometimes if someone comes in, I think, I think there might be a question of autism, or I can see them in this whole different way that can add to their behavioural support plan or working with the psychologist. And I think that's a real superpower that we just see so much within the session. So that's one thing. I've kind of been writing an article, and that's one thing that's really interested me. My supervision space, I supervise, and I just love that work, and I hold kind of a group supervision space that goes with the season. So we've just finished up summer, and then we will be doing a winter, so that kind of is a 3-month. But my kind of thing that I am excited about is I'm going to start a new art collective for artists that are art therapists, because I was really finding that a lot of people, where I'm their supervisor, will come in and making art and just being like, this is so important, and I don't have the space to do that. And myself as well, having the toddler and working full time. Yeah, it's 100%, it's so important. So I'm really excited to start this kind of new collective and just have a space where we can, a lot of people have different things that come up, like, I find that my artist identity and my art therapy identity is blurring, and what do I do with that? Or I don't have time for that. And just for a lot of, not all, but for a lot of art therapists, art has really spoken to us, and the artist within is so important. And when we lose that, we can feel quite lost. So I'm hoping to start a new art collective where, it'll be an online support and exhibit, and
that is beautiful. Because a lot of art therapists that I've met are artists, and they came into the profession because of that, because of same as me, understanding the healing power of it. And it's not just being an artist, but understand how much it can help others with that tool. And and there's no space for both, kind of. It's like two identities in one. It's like your Gemini side, you have the both approaches, but serving one purpose. Yes, beautiful. Thank you. And what's the best way to find you if people want to contact you?
So they can find me through my LinkedIn, or give me an email, which is Annie_Kaleido, KALEIDO @outlook.com, or I have my website, Kaleido Art Therapy,
which I will put in the comments.
I do have an Instagram. I've been trying to go off Instagram recently and social media. I'm like, this isn't serving much purpose. But now and again I do check it, and and I have a newsletter as well, actually. So feel free to go on my website,
subscribe,
and go on the newsletter, and that's where I'll have information about my supervision sessions and articles and everything.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing everything today. And it was a big pleasure. And I'm hoping to hear back how everything goes with your new move and entering new space. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Valerie.